For 500,000 years, the ruins of Earth had slumbered in the cold void, silent and forgotten. The once great cradle of humanity, a species that had mysteriously vanished, remained untouched, buried under dust and time. Cities stood eerily preserved under domed shields. Ancient satellites drifted in the sky like ghostly sentinels, and deep beneath the surface, the last remnants of a war fleet lay dormant, waiting. They had been waiting for a long time. Commander Yereth of the Vatek Dominion stood at the bridge of his exploration vessel, gazing at the blue planet through the viewport. It was a rare thing, an untouched world in this quadrant of space. The Dominion had conquered and consumed hundreds of civilizations, but never before had they come across a planet so abandoned. And yet, it was not empty. "Scanners indicate large artificial structures across the surface, Commander," a junior officer reported, her tendrils twitching nervously. "The technology is ancient, but intact." Yereth narrowed his black eyes. That was unusual. Most dead civilizations left behind ruins, crumbling and eroded by time. But this looked as though its inhabitants had simply walked away. He turned to the ship's elder scientist, Kavor. Could they still be here? Perhaps underground? Kavor, his aged features etched with caution, studied the readings. No signs of biological life. But there is something else. He paused, his fingers tightening on his datapad. The planet is shielded. Yereth's brow furrowed. Shielded? By whom? We don't know, Kavor admitted, but the energy signatures are active. It's as if someone sealed this planet away. Yereth exhaled slowly. The idea of a lost world protected by unseen forces was unsettling. He had heard rumors of ancient empires that had vanished without explanation, leaving behind only myths and ruins. Could humanity have been one of them? "Prepare a landing party," Yereth ordered. "We're going down." The shuttle descended through the atmosphere, slipping past the ancient satellite network, which was still operational but unresponsive. The landing party consisted of Yereth, Kavor, and 5 heavily armed soldiers. The moment they touched down on the cracked pavement of an enormous, silent city, a heavy stillness settled over them. Towering skyscrapers stood like silent giants, their surfaces covered in dust but unmarred by age. Strange symbols, human language, covered neon-lit signs that had long since gone dark. Hover vehicles sat frozen in place as though their occupants had abandoned them mid-journey. "This isn't right," one of the soldiers muttered. "It's like they just disappeared." Kavor approached a nearby console, brushing off centuries of dust. His claws tapped against the surface, and to his shock, it flickered to life. "This technology is still functioning?" Yereth asked in disbelief. Kavor nodded. "Not just functioning, preserved." He glanced around, his face troubled. This was not the work of decay. Someone, or something, intended for this world to remain untouched. The Dominion had conquered many civilizations, but none had prepared for their own demise like this. The humans had planned for something. But for what? "Commander," another soldier called out. "You need to see this." Yereth followed him through the skeletal remains of the city, past enormous statues of human warriors frozen in time. They entered a grand hall, its vast ceiling lined with murals depicting battles among the stars. But at the center of the room, beneath a shattered glass dome, lay the real discovery. A warship. It was massive, far larger than anything the Dominion had ever built. Its sleek, black hull was lined with runes of an unknown origin. It rested within a dry dock, surrounded by dormant machinery. "This is a war fleet," Kavor whispered, awestruck. Yereth felt his pulse quicken. No, this is a war graveyard. His voice was hushed, almost reverent. What were they preparing for? Then something changed. The air crackled. A deep hum resonated through the city, vibrating beneath their feet. The ship's dark hull flickered, once, twice, and then it came alive. The ship was waking up. Alarms blared from Kavor's scanner. "Commander, something's happening." The ship's surface shifted, revealing a hidden insignia, one that had not been seen in 500,000 years, a symbol of a species that had once ruled the stars, humanity. Then a voice echoed through the chamber, deep, mechanical, cold. "Identity confirmed, foreign presence detected, initializing protocol, last stand." Yareth had no time to react before the entire city roared back to life. The hum grew into a deafening roar as the city around them shuddered with newfound life. Lights flickered on, ancient street lamps illuminating dust-covered roads. Massive holographic billboards flared back into existence, displaying human faces, military insignias, and unreadable warnings in an ancient Earth language. But the warship was the real threat. The insignia burned bright on its hull, and unseen machinery within the massive structure rumbled, as if stretching after a long slumber. The dry dock's mechanical arms, silent for 500,000 years, jerked into motion, spitting dust and debris as they recalibrated. The ground trembled beneath Yareth's feet. Kavor, still hunched over his scanner, paled. "Commander, the ship is powering up." "No." Yareth's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's waking up." One of the soldiers cursed, gripping his plasma rifle tighter. "Do we shoot?" "Absolutely not," Yareth snapped. "We don't even know what it's doing." Then the voice returned. Cold, mechanical, emotionless. "Last stand protocol activated. Initializing defense measures. All foreign entities, prepare for annihilation." A metallic groan echoed as the warship's front bay doors slowly peeled open, revealing an abyss of darkness within. The air rippled with static. The ship was scanning them. Yareth clenched his jaw. This was not an empty ruin. It was a fortress left behind for a war that never came. A war meant to be fought by ghosts. "Commander," Kavor breathed, eyes wide. "We need to leave, now." "Agreed." Yareth activated his communicator. "Recall the shuttle. Full extraction." "Sir, we're getting heavy interference," the pilot crackled back. "Something's jamming our signal. We can't lock onto your location." That was bad. Very bad. The ship's hum turned into an ear-piercing shriek as energy surged along its hull, neon blue circuits flaring to life. A deep, rhythmic thudding began somewhere below them. Machinery older than the Dominion itself was activating. A second voice, different from the first, crackled to life. "Stand by for combat readiness check. Running diagnostics." Yareth turned to Kavor. "Can you stop it?" Kavor's hands trembled over his scanner. Commander, I don't even know how it works. It's not responding to Dominion systems. This is something else entirely." A soldier took a step back, panic creeping into his voice. "What if it sees us as a threat?" "It already does." The warship's abyssal bay shifted, and for the first time in 500,000 years, something moved inside. And then they saw them. Not humans, not skeletons, not the long-forgotten remains of a dead race. Machines. Rows upon rows of humanoid war drones, standing in eerie silence. Their plated bodies were ancient, covered in a strange alloy unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. They lined the interior of the warship like statues of a forgotten army, their weapons gleaming under flickering blue light. A cold realization settled over Yareth. The warfleet wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Waiting for something. Waiting for orders. and they had just woken it up. Finalizing combat protocols, one of the drones moved, its head tilted, its glassy, dark visor locking onto them with an inhuman focus, its arms unfolded, and from its wrist, a long, sharp blade of light extended with a hiss. Then another moved, and another. The city rumbled as more warships, hidden across the metropolis, began to hum with power. Kavor's voice was barely a whisper. Dear gods, it's a reactivation sequence. Yareth didn't wait. We are leaving, now! The team bolted for the exit, their boots slamming against the ground as the first drones stepped forward, their movements eerily fluid for machines. Red lights flickered across their forms, scanning, analyzing, preparing. Then, they charged. A flash of light erupted from one of the drones as it raised its weapon. A searing plasma shot screamed through the air, striking a soldier square in the back. He let out a strangled cry before collapsing. Smoke rising from the hole burned straight through his armor. The others barely had time to react. Yareth grabbed Kavor and shoved him forward. Move! 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 More drones activated. More red eyes flared to life. The city itself seemed to rise against them. The streets erupted into chaos. The once silent ruins of Earth's last bastion now thundered with the sound of awakening war machines. Red lights flickered to life in the buildings above, and the warships buried in dry docks let out eerie mechanical groans as they powered up for the first time in 500,000 years. Yareth's boots pounded against the cracked pavement as he sprinted alongside Kavor and the remaining soldiers. Plasma bolts screamed past them, carving molten holes into the ancient structures around them. Get to cover, Yareth barked. They ducked behind a fallen column as another blast of searing light tore through the air. One of the soldiers, a young warrior named Vesh, barely managed to dive aside before a drone's blade cleaved into the ground where he'd stood. The moment it missed, the machine adjusted, its red eyes locking onto him with terrifying precision. Vesh didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. A blue plasma shot struck the drone's chest. The bolt hit, but it did nothing. The drone didn't flinch. It didn't stagger. The plasma barely left a scorch mark on its armor. Then, with a speed no biological being could match, it moved. Vesh's scream was cut short as the drone's energy blade sliced clean through him. His body collapsed in two, smoldering. Kavor's hands shook as he ducked lower. Commander, he rasped, our weapons are useless. Yareth gritted his teeth. He had seen advanced combat drones before, but these were something else. No weak points, no hesitation, no wasted movement. They weren't just programmed to kill, they were designed to win. Humanity built these. And for the first time in his life, Yareth understood why the Dominion's oldest record spoke of humanity in whispers. The humans had not gone to war recklessly. They had gone to war knowing that if they lost, their enemy would never forget the cost of winning. Fall back, he roared. His soldiers sprinted, weaving through crumbling buildings as the machines gave chase. The drones didn't speak. They didn't issue warnings. They simply hunted. More warships were rising in the distance. Their black hulls gleamed under the city's newly reawakened lights. Ancient defense turrets along the skyline twitched, as if confused by the passage of time, and then began locking onto anything not human. Kavor skidded to a stop in front of a massive security checkpoint. A thick blast door loomed ahead, one built to withstand planetary bombardment. He fumbled with his scanner, sweat dripping down his temple. It's locked, he gasped. Yareth spun, raising his rifle. The drones were closing in. Vesh was dead. Another soldier had already fallen. The remaining 3 warriors had their weapons raised. But what was the point? Plasma didn't even scratch these things. The drones didn't care. They were patient, unstoppable. We can't fight them, Kavor yelled, slamming his fist against the scanner. We need a way out. Then work faster, Ureth snapped. A soldier let out a sharp cry as a drone lunged from the shadows, grabbing him by the throat. With one crushing movement, the machine ripped his head from his shoulders and tossed the twitching body aside. A second drone fired. Another soldier fell. Only Ureth and Cavor remained. Then a miracle. Cavor's scanner let out a loud chime, and the ancient door hissed as long-dead hydraulics rumbled back to life. The two of them dived through the opening just as the drones surged forward. Slam! The heavy doors sealed shut, cutting off the nightmare behind them. The pounding of metal fists echoed against the blast shield, but the door was built for war. Even the drones couldn't break through. Ureth collapsed against the cold wall, panting. That was too close. Cavor didn't respond. He was still staring at the scanner, horror on his face. What? Ureth demanded. Cavor swallowed hard. His voice was barely audible. Commander, we're not in the clear. The room they had entered wasn't just a security checkpoint. It was a control center. Dozens of inactive monitors lined the walls, covered in static. Holotables flickered. Data screens displayed error messages. But the main console, at the very center, was active. And it was displaying a countdown. Ureth's breath caught in his throat. What is that? Cavor's fingers flew over the ancient keys, struggling to translate. He wasn't fluent in the old human language, but certain words still held meaning, even after 500,000 years. One word stood out. Retribution. Cavor looked up, eyes wide with fear. This isn't just a city, it's a failsafe. His voice shook. When we woke the war fleet, we didn't just activate the machines. The countdown continued. 2 minutes 53 seconds. 2 minutes 52 seconds. We started a planetary defense system, Cavor whispered. Ureth's mind raced. What kind of system? Cavor's hands clenched into fists. He had read Dominion reports on long-extinct civilizations before. He had studied the rise and fall of galactic empires. He had seen the warnings buried in the oldest historical archives. But nothing had ever prepared him for this. He turned to Ureth, his voice hollow. If this reaches 0, he took a deep breath. Everything in orbit is going to die. Ureth felt his stomach drop. A planetary defense system. Not just some automated turrets. Not just war drones. If humanity had built a failsafe strong enough to still be active after 500,000 years, then it meant only one thing. This world was never meant to be conquered. And now, the Dominion fleet, his fleet, was floating helplessly in orbit, completely unaware of what was about to happen. 000245. The countdown kept ticking down, each second dragging them closer to catastrophe. Ureth snapped out of his shock. Can you stop it? Cavor's fingers trembled as he worked through the ancient interface. The human systems were strange, unlike anything the Dominion had ever designed. Layered encryption, military-grade firewalls. Even after 500,000 years, it was as if the system still expected an attack. Cavor swallowed hard. I don't know. It's locked behind something called command authorization. Ureth scowled. Meaning? Meaning only a human could override it. Silence. That single sentence hit harder than any weapon. Only a human. But there were no humans left. Humanity was gone. Vanished. Their cities had been preserved, their warships sealed away, but they themselves were missing. The most dominant species the galaxy had ever known had simply disappeared. Yet their weapons remained, and they were still doing their job. 00210. Cavor let out a frustrated growl. We're running out of time, Ureth forced himself to think. If there were no humans left, then why was the system still running? Someone, or something, had built this failsafe to function without them, which meant there had to be another way in. He scanned the control room. The massive screens displayed half-functional readouts of the city. A few flickered with old battle plans, long-forgotten simulations of war campaigns that had never been fought. Then his eyes landed on the pod. It was nestled in the far corner of the room. Large. Sealed shut. Its surface was covered in dust, but unlike everything else in the control center, it was powered. A preservation pod. Ureth strode toward it, brushing off the grime. His breath hitched when he saw the label. Genetic Archive, Emergency Command. He turned to Kavor. Get this open, now. Kavor blinked. Commander, we don't know what's inside. 000145. We don't have a choice, Ureth barked. If there's anything left of humanity, anything that can override this system, it's in here. Kavor hesitated for only a second before he started working. His scanner buzzed as he hacked into the controls, overriding the ancient locks. The pod let out a slow, pressurized hiss as it finally opened. The moment the lid peeled back, cold air spilled into the room. And inside, something moved. Ureth's breath caught. It wasn't a corpse. It wasn't dust and bones. It was a human, a man, frozen in time, preserved in the cryogenic pod for 500,000 years. His body twitched as the preservation systems shut down, his lungs gasping for their first breath in eternity. His eyes snapped open. Golden. Glowing. Not weak, not fragile, not diminished by time. The human sat up, dazed, scanning the room with sharp, predatory focus. He was built for war, his physique still powerful despite the ages he had spent in stasis. His gaze locked onto Ureth and Kavor, assessing them instantly. A voice crackled from the control panel. Emergency command identity confirmed. Override authorization accepted. Kavor gasped. The countdown stopped. Silence filled the room. Ureth barely had time to process what had happened before the human slowly rose from the pod. His feet touched the ground for the first time in 500,000 years. Then, he spoke. His voice was deep, rough, filled with an ancient weight. Who the hell woke me up? Ureth stared at the human, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. A survivor. A living, breathing human. After 500,000 years, after humanity had vanished, this one remained. And now he was awake. The human flexed his fingers, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the weight of eternity. His golden eyes flickered with something unnerving, not the confusion of someone displaced in time, but the sharp, immediate assessment of a soldier who had been trained to wake up ready for war. Kavor swallowed hard. He took a slow step back, eyes darting between Ureth and the towering figure before them. The human's gaze landed on the control panels, the frozen countdown, and the Dominion uniforms. His expression darkened. "I'll ask one more time," he said, voice like distant thunder. "Who the hell woke me up?" Ureth, for the first time in his life, felt small. The Dominion had conquered worlds. They had crushed civilizations. But nothing in the Dominion archives had prepared him for this. A human who had survived the impossible. A human built to endure. Ureth cleared his throat, forcing himself to speak. "We are explorers. We came across this planet and—" "Bullshit!" The human's voice cut through him like a blade. He took a step forward, unafraid, unshaken. "You woke up the defense grid," the human continued, scanning the data screens. His golden eyes flicked over the damage reports, the still-locked war protocols, the ancient systems waiting for commands. "That means you triggered the failsafe." His gaze snapped back to them. "So tell me, how many of your ships are in orbit?" Ureth hesitated. "A fleet." The human exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. Perfect. Just what I needed to deal with first thing after a 500,000-year nap. Cavor took a cautious step forward. You're human, aren't you? The man turned to him, expression unreadable. Obviously. But how? Cavor's voice shook. Humanity vanished. There's no record of your people after the collapse. You were gone. The human's jaw tightened. The collapse. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he reached out and activated one of the control panels. The room dimmed. Holograms flickered to life. And Yereth saw what happened to humanity. The projection displayed war, not between species, not between rival empires, a war between humanity itself. Explosions rippled across the stars. Gigantic warships, larger than anything the Dominion had ever built, shattered under their own weapons. Planets burned. Entire civilizations collapsed into dust as something monstrous tore through the fabric of space. Yereth's stomach twisted. What is this? The human's expression was grim. The reason you never found our bodies. The war on the screen wasn't a normal war. This was something else, something worse. Cavor pointed to the battlefield, his voice barely a whisper. That doesn't make sense. You fought yourselves? The human didn't look away. We fought something inside us, he said. Something we created, and something we couldn't stop. The holograms shifted. Superweapons, not just planetary destruction, not just world enders. These were worse. Weapons that tore apart time itself. Weapons that devoured the very laws of physics. Weapons that unmade existence. Humanity, at the peak of its power, had reached too far, and something had pulled back. Cavor took a trembling step forward. You lost? The human let out a short, humorless laugh. No, he said. We won. He turned, his golden eyes flickering with something darker. But the cost was everything. The holograms faded. Silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Yereth could barely breathe. Humanity had been more powerful than any of them had ever imagined. They had reached into the unknown, conquered the stars, and then they had destroyed themselves to stop something worse. And yet this one remained, the last remnant of a war fought long before the Dominion even existed. Yereth took a slow breath. You're the last human, aren't you? The man's expression darkened. No. Cavor blinked. But then, there's more of us. Yereth's mind reeled. Where? The human's golden eyes glowed in the dim light. Sleeping. He turned back to the control panel. His fingers hovered over the ancient keys, still familiar despite the eons. And then, he whispered the words that would change the fate of the galaxy. It's time to wake them up. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. It's time to wake them up. Yereth's heart pounded. He had seen countless wars, had ordered the destruction of entire civilizations, but nothing had ever made his blood run cold like this. Humanity was not extinct. They were sleeping. And this man, this survivor, this warrior, was about to bring them back. Yereth glanced at Cavor. The scientist's face had gone pale, his tendrils twitching in raw terror. He understood. They both did. If even one human warship could remain operational for 500,000 years, if their defense systems were still functional, then what would happen if they all returned? Yereth took a slow step forward. You can't be serious. The human turned slightly, golden eyes locking onto him. Why not? His voice was calm. Too calm. Yereth clenched his jaw. The Dominion rules this part of the galaxy now. If your people come back, they won't care about your Dominion. Yereth stiffened. And why is that? The human tapped something on the control panel. A new hologram flared to life. A galactic map. but not one Ureth recognized. The star charts were old, showing an empire so vast it made the Dominion look like an insect. Hundreds, thousands of marked worlds, human-controlled, human-dominated, human-ruled. Ureth's mouth went dry. At their height, humanity had owned more than the Dominion did now. The human's voice was quiet. You think your people rule the galaxy. A flicker of movement, more holograms displaying long-dead wars, armies crumbling before human fleets, entire species wiped from history. Your kind are just scavengers picking through the ruins of something far older. The human turned back to the controls. You don't rule the galaxy. His fingers danced over the keys. We do, Cavor choked. Wait. A deep, metallic rumble vibrated through the floor. The ancient systems, dormant for 500,000 years, surged to life with a sound like a god taking its first breath. Ureth stumbled back. What did you do? The human didn't answer. The screens shifted, displaying massive underground chambers across the planet. Thousands, millions of sealed pods lined the halls. Some biological, others mechanical. Some held soldiers, some held commanders, some held things that had no name in the Dominion's language, and all of them were waking up. One of the screens displayed the war fleet, not just the one ship in the dry dock, not just a few hundred. Thousands. Buried beneath the planet, an entire fleet had been sleeping for eons, and now they were activating. Alarms blared, ancient launch bays hissed open, expelling dust as weapons that had once conquered the stars rearmed themselves. The countdown had never been a fail-safe. It had been a wake-up call. Cavor gripped the console in horror. You're bringing them all back. The human exhaled slowly. That was the plan. Ureth's voice turned sharp. And what happens when they see us? The human finally turned, looking Ureth in the eyes. His expression was unreadable. That depends. On what? Ureth demanded. The human's golden eyes glowed. On whether or not they think you're the enemy. The entire planet trembled, from the depths of ancient vaults, from war factories buried beneath mountains. They woke. Soldiers, machines, weapons. 500,000 years had passed, but time had not eroded them. Humanity had not simply sealed itself away. It had prepared for the moment it would rise again. And now, that moment had come. Ureth staggered as a deep, metallic groan reverberated through the control room. The holographic map showed movement, thousands of red markers blinking to life. Vault doors split open. Mechanized walkers climbed from the ruins. Gigantic warships, each one larger than the Dominion's capital fleet, lifted from their hidden docks, shaking off dust like slumbering giants. Cavor's voice trembled. This isn't just a military base, it's a tomb waking up. The human didn't react. He simply watched as his people stirred, as ancient war protocols engaged. His golden eyes tracked each activation report, each signal of life. They were waiting for this moment, he said quietly, waiting for the time to return. Ureth swallowed. His fleet was still in orbit. The Dominion ships had no idea what was happening below. If humanity saw them as invaders, if they attacked, this wouldn't be a battle, it would be extermination. Call them off, Ureth snapped. The human glanced at him. Excuse me? Your fleet. Your people. Ureth's voice was sharp, but underneath it there was something else. Fear. They don't know we're not a threat. The human exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. He looked tired, ancient, as if he had carried the weight of 500,000 years of history alone. They won't fire first, he said at last. Ureth wasn't convinced. And if they see us as enemies? The human's golden eyes flickered. Then, he said softly, You'll have about 30 seconds before your fleet is erased from existence. Cavor let out a strangled sound. Ureth clenched his fists. Then tell them we're not enemies. The human studied him for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, he turned back to the console. His fingers danced over the keys, inputting commands faster than Ureth could track. The system responded immediately. A new signal pulsed from the ancient network, shooting up toward the sky. A message. Admiral Velak paced on the bridge of his warship, his spines bristling. "Where is the landing team?" "No response, Admiral," an officer said nervously. "There's interference." Velak's gaze narrowed. Something was wrong. Then alarms flared across the command deck. "Admiral," a technician gasped. "New contacts, thousands." A massive blip appeared on their scanners. Ships. Big ships. Velak's blood went cold. They were rising from the planet like specters, warships unlike any in recorded history. Their designs were old, yet somehow beyond anything the Dominion had ever faced. And worst of all, they were powering weapons. "Sir," another officer whispered. They're human." Silence fell over the bridge. For hundreds of thousands of years, humanity had been nothing more than a myth, a lost species, a forgotten nightmare. The idea that they might return had been laughable, yet here they were, and they were waking up. Then a message flashed across the Dominion channels, one single phrase, one single warning. "Stand down!" Velak's claws dug into the armrest of his command throne. He stared at the incoming warships, at the colossal vessels that could erase his entire fleet in minutes. He had no choice. "Cease all hostile actions," he ordered. "Do not fire." The Dominion fleet obeyed. But it didn't matter, because humanity was already here. Ureth let out a slow breath as the transmission sent. The human sat back slightly, watching the data scroll. "They're hesitating," he murmured. "Good," Cavor said, voice shaking. Then another deep rumble shook the city. Not from the Dominion, not from the warships above, from deeper underground. The human's golden eyes narrowed. "No," Ureth frowned. "What?" The human's face darkened. "Not all of them should be waking up." Another tremor, then another. The screens flickered. More red alerts filled the displays, each one flashing symbols in the ancient human language. Cavor paled as he translated them. "Containment breach." Ureth's blood went cold. "Containment of what?" The human's jaw tightened. "The war wasn't just against ourselves," he said quietly. "There were other things." Another tremor, this one stronger. Dust fell from the ceiling. The security doors groaned as if something far beneath them was moving. The human's face hardened. "We didn't just fight an enemy." His fingers hovered over the console. His golden eyes burned. "We locked something away." A final deep, monstrous growl rumbled from the depths of the planet. Something was waking up. Something that should have stayed buried. The human turned to Ureth. "You need to call your fleet back. Now." Admiral Velak paced on the bridge of his warship, his spines bristling. "Where is the landing team?" "No response, Admiral," an officer said nervously. "There's interference." Velak's gaze narrowed. Something was wrong. Then alarms flared across the command deck. "Admiral," a technician gasped. "New contacts, thousands." A massive blip appeared on their scanners. Ships. Big ships. Velak's blood went cold. They were rising from the planet like specters, warships unlike any in recorded history. Their designs were old, yet somehow beyond anything the Dominion had ever faced. And worst of all, they were powering weapons. "Sir," another officer whispered. They're They're human. Silence fell over the bridge. For hundreds of thousands of years, humanity had been nothing more than a myth, a lost species, a forgotten nightmare. The idea that they might return had been laughable, yet here they were, and they were waking up. Then a message flashed across the Dominion channels, one single phrase, one single warning. "Stand down!" Valak's claws dug into the armrest of his command throne. He stared at the incoming warships, at the colossal vessels that could erase his entire fleet in minutes. He had no choice. "Cease all hostile actions," he ordered. "Do not fire." The Dominion fleet obeyed. But it didn't matter, because humanity was already here. Ureth let out a slow breath as the transmission sent. The human sat back slightly, watching the data scroll. "They're hesitating," he murmured. "Good," Kavor said, voice shaking. Then another deep rumble shook the city. Not from the Dominion, not from the warships above, from deeper underground. The human's golden eyes narrowed. "No," Ureth frowned. "What?" The human's face darkened. "Not all of them should be waking up." Another tremor, then another. The screens flickered. More red alerts filled the displays, each one flashing symbols in the ancient human language. Kavor paled as he translated them. "Containment breach." Ureth's blood went cold. "Containment of what?" The human's jaw tightened. "The war wasn't just against ourselves," he said quietly. "There were other things." Another tremor, this one stronger. Dust fell from the ceiling. The security doors groaned as if something far beneath them was moving. The human's face hardened. "We didn't just fight an enemy." His fingers hovered over the console. His golden eyes burned. "We locked something away." A final deep, monstrous growl rumbled from the depths of the planet. Something was waking up. Something that should have stayed buried. The human turned to Ureth. "You need to call your fleet back. Now." The rumbling grew louder, not the sound of warships taking flight, not the hum of ancient machinery reactivating. This was something deeper, something wrong. Ureth felt it in his bones, a low, unnatural vibration, like the very planet itself was afraid. The human moved fast, hands a blur as he input commands into the control panel. Screens flashed red, alarms blared, subterranean vaults had been breached, something had escaped. Ureth forced down his panic. "What did you lock away down there?" The human's jaw clenched. "A mistake." The Dominion commander narrowed his eyes. "What kind of mistake?" The human hesitated. Then he turned to Ureth, and for the first time he looked uncertain. "It wasn't just humanity that disappeared," he said. "Something else was wiped out." Kavor's tendrils twitched. Another species? The human's golden eyes burned. Something worse. Another deep tremor. This time the entire city lurched, as if some great force was shifting beneath the surface. The walls groaned. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then, a roar, not mechanical, not artificial, something alive. The lights flickered. The control screens glitched. The symbols shifted into jagged, corrupted text, as if the very system itself was screaming. Kavor gasped. It's overriding the security systems." Ureth spun toward the human. "What the hell is waking up?" The human exhaled sharply. His fingers flexed, curling into fists. "A long time ago," he said quietly. "We weren't alone." The red alerts intensified. The temperature dropped. The air felt heavier. "We ruled the galaxy," the human continued, "but we weren't the first ones to try." Kavor's voice shook. "What do you mean?" The human's gaze hardened. "We exterminated them," he said. "Completely." Ureth's breath caught. "A species. Erased, not conquered, not subjugated, erased. And now, after 500,000 years, they were coming back. Admiral Valak stood frozen as the second signal came from the planet. Not from the human, not from the warships, from something else. "Sir," an officer stammered, there's something down there." Valak turned to the holographic display. What had once been a dead world was now alive with warnings, and beneath the surface, deep beneath the layers of buried cities and forgotten war machines, something was moving. The Dominion had conquered planets before. They had seen rebellions, armies, biological horrors. But nothing like this. The energy signatures were wrong. Older than the humans. Older than everything. A deep pulse rippled through the scanners. And for the first time in Dominion history, the sensors screamed in fear. Ureth barely had time to react before the floor split open. A deep, jagged crack tore through the ground, splitting the control room in two. Machinery toppled. Cavor barely caught himself before falling into the growing abyss. The human didn't move. He just stared into the dark. Ureth pulled Cavor back, his claws digging into the scientist's arm. "We need to get out of here." But the human smiled. It wasn't amusement. It wasn't confidence. It was relief. "The war never ended," he murmured. Cavor trembled. "What?" The human's golden eyes gleamed. "You asked what happened to us," he said. "Why we vanished." The ground shuddered. Cracks spread across the city. In the distance, human warships began shifting into combat formations. Ureth realized, with growing horror, that this moment was what they had been waiting for. The human turned to him. "We didn't leave," he said. "We locked ourselves away." Ureth's blood went cold. The human's smile faded. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because we knew they would come back." Then, from the darkness, it emerged. A shape. Massive. Not organic. Not mechanical. Something else. Something wrong. It didn't crawl. It didn't walk. It simply existed, as if reality itself had forgotten how to reject it. Ureth's mind screamed. He felt his body rejecting the thing's presence, like his very cells understood this creature was not meant to be. Cavor collapsed, clutching his head. The human, however, just cracked his neck. And for the first time since waking, he looked satisfied. Finally, he reached for something on his wrist, a small device, a trigger. Ureth barely had time to process what was happening before the human pressed it. A deep, echoing boom rippled through the planet. The sky darkened. Then, from the horizon, the real war fleet rose. Not just the ships in orbit, not just the weapons buried beneath the ground. This was something older, something deadlier, something built for extinction. They had been waiting. For 500,000 years, they had been waiting. And now, as the first of the old enemy emerged from its prison, humanity's greatest weapons turned toward the stars once more. The last human smiled. "Now," he whispered, "we finish this." The Galactic Empire had stood unchallenged for thousands of years. Its fleets patrolled the vast reaches of space, its warships a terrifying symbol of dominance. Hundreds of alien species had bowed before its might, their homeworlds annexed, their cultures erased, their people forced into servitude. The Empire ruled with an iron fist, confident that no force in the galaxy could stand against it. That was until they met humanity. The Empire's first encounter with Earth had been unceremonious. A scouting vessel had stumbled upon the Sol system, expecting to find a primitive world, perhaps a fledgling civilization just beginning to understand space travel. Instead, they found a species that had already colonized its neighboring planets, constructed massive space stations, and, most concerningly, built weapons that rivaled those of the Empire. At first, the Empire had dismissed humanity as an anomaly, an upstart species that had advanced too quickly for its own good. It sent a diplomatic envoy demanding Earth's submission. The message had been clear: surrender and be assimilated into the Empire, or be annihilated. The reply had been equally clear: no. The Emperor had laughed when he read the response. He had seen this before: countless civilizations that believed they could resist the Empire. None had succeeded. Humanity would be no different. So the Empire sent its fleets. They arrived in the Sol system with overwhelming force, hundreds of warships bristling with weapons capable of reducing entire planets to rubble. They expected Earth's surrender within hours. Instead, they found hell waiting for them. When the Empire's ships entered the system, they were met with a coordinated strategic defense unlike anything they had ever encountered. Humanity did not scatter in fear. They did not attempt to negotiate. They fought, and they fought like demons. The Imperial fleet had expected planetary defenses, perhaps a few orbital stations with outdated weapons. What they found was a fully armed, war-hardened military force with ships that moved like predators in the void. Humanity's vessels were smaller than the Empire's, but they were faster, more maneuverable, and bristling with weapons that cut through Imperial armor like a hot knife through flesh. Admiral Harkon, commanding the invasion, watched in stunned silence as his capital ships, vessels that had brought entire worlds to their knees, began to fall. Swarms of human fighters darted between the Empire's sluggish warships, striking critical points, crippling engines, and targeting weapon systems with terrifying precision. And then came humanity's fleet. They hadn't just been defending Earth. They had built their own armada. Dozens of sleek, deadly battleships emerged from behind Luna, engines flaring as they surged toward the Imperial fleet. Their weapons didn't rely on traditional plasma or energy-based technology. They used railguns, massive, devastating cannons that accelerated metal projectiles at speeds that defied comprehension. The Empire had dismissed kinetic weapons as outdated, primitive. They had never faced human engineering. A single round from a railgun tore through an Imperial battleship's hull, cutting through armor and bulkheads like paper. Explosions rippled through the fleet as the humans unleashed their fury. For the first time in centuries, an Imperial fleet was losing. Admiral Harkon's face turned pale as he watched ship after ship vanish from his command screen. His forces were being destroyed. This is impossible, he muttered. They're just humans. But it was happening, and it was only the beginning. When the battle was over, the Empire's fleet was in ruins. Harkon's flagship was one of the few vessels that managed to escape, limping back to Imperial space with the news. The Emperor was waiting when Harkon returned, his golden robes gleaming under the artificial lights of the Imperial palace. "You have failed me," the Emperor said coldly, watching the broken admiral kneel before him. "Explain yourself." Harkon swallowed. "The humans, my Emperor, they are unlike any race we have encountered before." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "They are primitives. They should not have been able to stand against us." Harkon shook his head. "They are not primitives. They are something else. Something terrifying." He hesitated, then pulled up a holographic recording of the battle. The Emperor watched as Imperial ships were torn apart, as human vessels moved with deadly precision. And then, finally, he saw the message. It had been broadcasted across the Imperial channels after the battle. A human general, standing in front of the burning wreckage of an Imperial dreadnought, his face calm, his voice steady. "To the Emperor of the Galactic Empire," he said, "you came to our system expecting an easy victory. You came to enslave us." He leaned forward, his eyes dark with a promise. "You have made a mistake." The transmission ended. Silence filled the Imperial chamber. The Emperor stared at the darkened screen, his fingers curling into fists. Harkon swallowed hard. "What are your orders, my Emperor?" The Emperor's jaw tightened. "Send the full might of the Empire," he said. "Burn their worlds. Erase them from existence." Back on Earth, preparations had already begun. The battle for Sul had been a victory, but humanity knew the war was far from over. The Empire would return, this time with everything it had. And humanity would be ready. Across the colonies, shipyards worked day and night, constructing new warships, arming them with the same railguns that had torn through the Empire's fleet. Scientists developed new shielding technology. Engineers built faster, deadlier fighters. Every man and woman capable of fighting was preparing for what was to come. Humanity was not fighting for conquest. They were not fighting for power. They were fighting to survive. And if the Empire thought they could crush Earth, as they had done to so many others, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The Emperor wasted no time. Within days of the disastrous battle over Sul, he had mobilized the Imperial First Armada, a force so vast that its very presence had subjugated entire star systems without a single shot being fired. Thousands of warships, some the size of small moons, assembled in the Imperial core. At the heart of this fleet was the Doom-Forged, a colossal dreadnought said to be invincible, its hull reinforced with quantum shielding that no known weapon could penetrate. The order was clear. Humanity must be annihilated. The Empire's admirals were confident. Their first defeat had been an embarrassment, but now they would unleash the true might of the Imperial war machine. They would not underestimate the humans again. But what they didn't know was that humanity had no intention of waiting. High above Mars, hidden within the asteroid belt, the HSS Revenant drifted in the shadows. It was one of humanity's newest warships, built after the Battle of Sol, with technology reverse-engineered from captured Imperial wreckage. Sleek and almost invisible to sensors, the Revenant was a ghost in the void. Captain Marcus Kane, a hardened veteran, stood on the bridge, watching the incoming sensor feeds. "We've confirmed it," his intelligence officer said. "They're coming, thousands of them." A lesser man might have felt despair. Kane only felt determination. "Send word to High Command," he ordered. "It's time to move to Phase 2. The Revenant vanished into the darkness, heading back to Earth. Humanity had no illusions about what was coming. The Empire would not offer a second chance. The only way to survive was to strike first. Korthos Prime was the Empire's largest shipyard, a planet-sized factory world responsible for building over 30% of the Imperial fleet. Destroying it wouldn't just be a blow, it would be devastating. Admiral Elizabeth Connors, the supreme commander of Earth's military forces, had known from the start that the war couldn't be won through defense alone. If humanity wanted to survive, it had to cripple the Empire's ability to wage war, and so Operation Eclipse was born. A strike force of 80 human warships, led by the newly completed HSS Dominion, set course for Korthos Prime. The Dominion was Earth's first true dreadnought, a behemoth designed to stand toe-to-toe with the best the Empire had to offer. The plan was bold, reckless, maybe even suicidal, but humanity didn't have the luxury of playing it safe. When the human fleet arrived, the Imperials didn't know what hit them. The Empire had assumed humanity would remain on the defensive, cowering behind their planetary defenses. They had never imagined that the humans would be bold enough to strike at the heart of Imperial territory. The orbital defenses of Korthos Prime were formidable. Hundreds of automated gun platforms, planetary shield generators, and battle stations guarded the shipyards. But the humans had a weapon the Empire had never encountered before: superluminal torpedoes. The moment the Dominion exited FTL, it unleashed a volley of torpedoes traveling at faster-than-light speeds, bypassing traditional defenses entirely. The first salvo struck critical shield relays, shorting out power grids across the planet's surface. In an instant, Korthos Prime was vulnerable. Then came the ground assault. Dropships filled with human shock troops descended onto the planet's surface, targeting shipyard control centers, fuel depots, and command bunkers. The Empire's soldiers were trained to fight in open warfare, but the humans fought like predators, hitting hard, striking fast, and disappearing before the enemy could retaliate. It was chaos. Entire factory complexes exploded, sending debris raining down over the city-sized shipyards. Imperial officers scrambled to regain control, but the humans were already inside their networks, hacking into systems, shutting down orbital defenses, and rerouting power away from critical sectors. It was an impossible victory, but the humans were making it happen. Back on the Imperial throne world, the news of Korthos Prime's destruction sent shockwaves through the ruling elite. The humans did what? One of the Emperor's advisors gasped. They destroyed one of our most vital shipyards, a military officer confirmed. Our losses are staggering. The fleet production schedule has been set back by years. The Emperor sat in silence, his face unreadable, his claws tapped against the armrest of his throne, his mind racing. "This changes everything," he muttered. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire was experiencing fear. Back on Earth, the celebrations were brief. The attack on Korthos Prime had been a stunning success, but humanity knew it had only bought itself time. The Empire would come back with a vengeance, and when they did, there would be no mercy. Admiral Connors gathered her top commanders in a war room beneath the surface of Luna Base. The holographic display showed a galaxy-wide map, with thousands of Imperial fleets moving like a tidal wave toward Earth. "They're still coming," one officer said grimly. "Then we make sure we're ready," Connors replied. Plans were drawn. Ships were built. Weapons were designed. Humanity had made its move. Now the real war was about to begin. And this time, they weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The destruction of Korthos Prime was more than a military disaster. It was an insult the Empire could not tolerate. Never before had an enemy dared to strike so deep into Imperial space, let alone win. The Emperor was furious. The throne room of the Imperial Palace was silent as he stood before his most trusted warlords, his golden robes flowing like liquid metal. His gaze burned with cold fury as he addressed his commanders. "These creatures have overstepped their bounds," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They believe themselves our equals. They believe they can hurt us." He turned toward Grand Admiral Kael Vortanis, the Supreme Commander of the Imperial Navy. A veteran of 1,000 campaigns, Vortanis was the most ruthless strategist the Empire had ever produced. Entire species had vanished under his command. "Grand Admiral," the Emperor said, his words sharp as blades, "you will remind humanity of its place, burn their worlds, erase them from history, make them suffer." Vortanis bowed. "It will be done." And so the Great Purge began. The Second Imperial Armada, one of the largest battle groups ever assembled, set course for the human colonies. It wasn't just a military strike, it was extermination. Their first target? Proxima Centauri. Home to over 80 million humans, Proxima had become one of Earth's most important colonies. Its shipyards produced some of humanity's finest warships, and its population had been fully mobilized for the war effort. It never stood a chance. The Empire came without warning. Massive planet-cracker warships arrived in orbit and unleashed hell. Cities burned as plasma bombardments rained from the sky. Defense fleets scrambled to respond, but the sheer size of the Imperial assault was overwhelming. The colony's orbital stations were torn apart in minutes. Admiral Erickson, in command of Proxima's defenses, sent a desperate message to Earth. "We can't hold. There are too many. Oh God, they're targeting civilians." Then the transmission cut out. By the time humanity's reinforcements arrived, it was too late. Proxima Centauri was gone. 80 million men, women, and children wiped from existence. The massacre of Proxima sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Empire had always been brutal. But this was genocide. On neutral worlds, alien diplomats whispered in hushed voices. For the first time, they began to question the Empire's power. If a species as young and ferocious as humanity could wound the Empire, then perhaps... The Empire wasn't as invincible as it seemed, but humanity wasn't interested in diplomacy. They were out for blood. After Proxima, the Imperial Armada moved toward Epsilon Eridani, another major human colony. They expected another easy slaughter. They were wrong. This time, humanity was waiting. The moment the Imperial fleet arrived, they found themselves ambushed. Hidden among the planet's asteroid belt was the largest human fleet ever assembled. Over 300 warships, including the HSS Titan, humanity's newest super dreadnought. Admiral Elizabeth Connors was in command. And she had a message for the Empire. "This is for Proxima, you bastards." The battle was unlike anything the Empire had ever faced. Human railguns ripped through Imperial warships before they could even return fire. Stealth corvettes darted between enemy lines, launching devastating attacks on Imperial carriers. The Titan's experimental plasma lances burned through shields like paper, cutting entire cruisers in half with a single shot. It was carnage. For the first time in history, an Imperial Grand Armada was annihilated, and at the center of it all was the Titan. The Empire's flagship, the Doomforged, tried to retreat. It never got the chance. A full barrage from the Titan pierced its engines, tore through its reactor core, and split the monstrous dreadnought in two. The Doomforged, once a symbol of Imperial dominance, was gone. And with it, so was the Empire's illusion of invincibility. Back on Earth, the news of Proxima's destruction had sent the world into mourning. But when word of the Titan's victory spread, that mourning turned into rage. Humanity was done running. Factories churned out warships at an unprecedented rate. Every able-bodied person enlisted. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons, new defenses, new strategies. The Imperial fleet had come to end humanity, but all they had done was make humanity stronger. Back in the Imperial Palace, the Emperor sat alone, staring at the battle reports. Proxima had burned, but so had the Doomforged. Humanity was not broken. They were rising. And for the first time in his long reign, the Emperor felt something foreign creep into his mind. Doubt. Earth knew the war wasn't won yet. The Empire still had fleets, armies, and planets beyond counting. But now, humanity had something the Empire had never given its enemies before. Hope. The Empire had made many mistakes in its long reign. It had crushed civilizations, enslaved entire species, and rewritten history to glorify its own power. But no mistake was greater than what it had done to humanity. The massacre at Proxima Centauri had been meant to instill fear. Instead, it had awakened something far more dangerous. Rage. Humanity was no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for vengeance, and they were about to bring hell to the Empire's doorstep. Humanity had learned a painful lesson in the war so far. They couldn't outmatch the Empire in sheer numbers. The Empire had thousands of fleets, countless soldiers, and near-limitless resources. A direct war of attrition would be suicide. So humanity did what they did best. They adapted. Instead of fighting head-on, they waged a new kind of war, a war of sabotage, deception, and precision strikes. The Silent Fleet was born. These were humanity's deadliest ships, stealth corvettes, infiltrator vessels, and cyber warfare drones designed to strike the Empire where it hurt the most. Their first target, the Imperial supply lines. While the Empire had endless fleets, those fleets needed fuel, food, and resources. Their war machine was massive, but it was not invulnerable. The Silent Fleet launched dozens of covert raids, targeting Imperial logistics centers, fuel depots, and manufacturing plants. Entire supply convoys vanished without a trace. Critical communication relays were hacked and scrambled, sowing chaos within the Empire's ranks. On occupied worlds, human special forces infiltrated cities and incited full-scale rebellions, arming enslaved populations with stolen Imperial weapons. It wasn't just war anymore. It was a revolution. The Emperor's fury grew with every lost fleet, every sabotaged factory, every system that fell into anarchy. And so he turned to his most ruthless enforcer, High Inquisitor Malachar. Malachar was not a soldier. He was a monster, a cruel, calculating strategist who had crushed hundreds of planetary uprisings with unspeakable brutality. To the Empire, he was a hero. To its enemies, he was a nightmare. His orders were simple. Find the humans. Crush them. Make them suffer. His first move was to attack the rebellious worlds, beginning with Verathis, a planet where humanity had inspired an uprising against Imperial rule. He didn't send troops to pacify the rebellion. He sent bioweapons. A new Imperial plague, engineered to target human DNA, was unleashed upon the planet. The disease spread in hours, turning its victims into twisted husks of agony before death. Within 3 days, the population of Verathis was extinct. The Empire broadcasted the horror across the galaxy, sending a clear message: resistance is futile. Submit or suffer the same fate. But Malachar had miscalculated, because humanity had been watching, and now they were coming for him. Humanity could not allow Malachar to continue his reign of terror. His death was non-negotiable. And so a Black Ops team, handpicked from Earth's deadliest special forces, was assembled. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the Imperial core, eliminate Malachar, send a message to the Empire that no one was untouchable. The team, known only as Shadow Hand, was led by Commander Jason Hunt, a man with a reputation for doing the impossible. Their infiltration was meticulous. Using stolen Imperial clearance codes, they hijacked a diplomatic transport bound for the Imperial capital. They moved through the city like ghosts, bypassing security, hacking surveillance systems, and planting explosive traps for their escape. They found Malachar in his personal stronghold, a fortress guarded by an army of elite Imperial soldiers. It didn't matter. The first silenced railgun shot took out his guards. The second pierced Malachar's skull. By the time the alarms blared, the Shadow Hand was already gone, leaving behind a message carved into Malachar's throne. For Proxima. The assassination shook the Empire to its core. Never in its history had someone so high-ranking been killed by an enemy. Never before had the Empire felt vulnerable. The Emperor himself ordered the city locked down, but it was too late. The seeds of fear had been planted. If Malachar could die, then no one was safe. The war was changing. The Empire had expected a short, brutal conquest. Instead, it was dragging into a nightmare. The Empire's greatest advantage, its sheer size, was now becoming a liability. It had too many systems to defend, too many supply chains to protect, too many enemies rising in the shadows. Humanity wasn't fighting the Empire head-on. They were tearing it apart from within. And worst of all, other species were starting to take notice. The Empire had ruled for millennia because the galaxy feared it. But now that fear was cracking. If humanity could stand against the Empire, then maybe others could too. Humanity had started this war alone. But now, they were gaining allies. Small rebellions were turning into full-scale insurgencies. Slave worlds were rising up, inspired by Earth's defiance. Even within the Empire, whispers of treason were spreading, officers questioning whether the Empire was truly invincible. The Emperor knew he had to act, fast, and so he issued a single, final order. End this war. Wipe them out. No more half measures. Bring the full force of the Empire down upon them. The largest fleet in history. 5,000 warships, entire armies, planet-crushing superweapons began to mobilize. It would be a war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Either humanity would fall, or the Empire itself would burn. The Empire had finally committed to total war. The Imperial Annihilation Fleet, 5,000 warships strong, began its march toward Earth and the remaining human colonies. Never before had such an armada been assembled. Planet-killer dreadnoughts, entire legions of cybernetic infantry, and experimental doomsday weapons capable of tearing moons apart. This was not just an invasion, it was extermination. The Emperor had given a simple order: no prisoners, no survivors. Reduce their worlds to dust. The countdown to humanity's last stand had begun. Beneath the surface of Luna Base, the leaders of humanity gathered. Admiral Elizabeth Connors stood at the center of the war room, surrounded by Earth's greatest minds, military tacticians, scientists, and rebel leaders from across the galaxy. A holographic projection showed the Empire's fleet advancing like a tidal wave. The silence in the room was heavy. "They'll be here in less than a month," one officer said grimly. "We can't stop them. There are too many." A murmur of uncertainty spread through the room. For all their victories, for all their resilience, how could humanity possibly win against a force this massive? But Connors refused to accept defeat. She took a deep breath and slammed her fist on the table. "We don't need to defeat them head-on," she said. "We just need to break them." Eyes turned toward her. "We can't win a war of attrition," she continued. "But what if we take away their will to fight? What if we hit them where it hurts the most?" She turned to the holographic map and pointed at the Imperial throne world. A stunned silence followed. "You're suggesting attacking the Imperial capital?" one commander asked. "Yes," Connors said. "If we assassinate the Emperor and destroy his command structure, the Empire will collapse from within." It was madness. It was impossible. But it was also their only chance. The plan was bold, reckless, maybe even suicidal. A strike team of humanity's best warriors, led by Commander Jason Hunt, would infiltrate the Imperial throne world and eliminate the Emperor. Meanwhile, humanity's remaining fleet, a mere 300 ships, would launch a desperate diversionary assault, drawing as much of the Annihilation Fleet away from Earth as possible. It was a gamble. If they failed, Earth would be defenseless. But if they succeeded? The Empire would fall. 3 weeks later, the sky burned. The Imperial Annihilation Fleet arrived, descending upon the Sol system like a storm of fire. Their warships blotted out the stars, their weapons glowing with the energy of 1,000 suns. Earth's fleet, outnumbered 15-1, charged forward without hesitation. Railguns fired. Explosions rippled across the void. Human warships maneuvered with deadly precision, punching above their weight class, taking out Imperial vessels 10 times their size. But for every Imperial ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. The battle was a slaughter, but it was a distraction. Because as the chaos raged in orbit, a single cloaked infiltration ship slipped past the carnage, heading toward the heart of the Empire. The Imperial throne world was a fortress, protected by legions of soldiers, AI-controlled defenses, and planetary shields stronger than anything humanity had ever faced. But humanity had come prepared. Using stolen Imperial access codes, the infiltration team bypassed the planetary blockade, landing inside the Grand Palace itself. They moved like ghosts, cutting down guards with silenced railguns and energy blades. Every step brought them closer to their target, the Emperor's personal chamber. Then the alarms blared. They had been discovered. The doors to the throne room slammed shut behind them. And there, sitting atop his golden throne, was the Emperor himself. He was not afraid. "You think you can kill a god?" he sneered, rising to his feet. His armored robes shimmered with energy shielding, his hands glowing with forbidden technology. Then the room exploded into chaos. The Imperial Guard stormed in, opening fire. The humans fought like demons, moving with impossible speed, their weapons tearing through the elite warriors like paper. And then, Hunt charged the Emperor. The two clashed in the center of the chamber, warrior against god. Energy shields flared, blades clashed. The Emperor fought with inhuman strength, his blows sending shockwaves through the room. But Hunt didn't stop. He fought not for glory, not for power, but for every world the Empire had destroyed, for every child killed on Proxima, for every city turned to ash, for humanity's future. And then, he struck the final blow. A single railgun round, fired point-blank into the Emperor's skull. The golden helm shattered, the Emperor's body collapsed, and the Empire died with him. The death of the Emperor sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Imperial command structure collapsed overnight. Without their god king, the Empire's admirals turned on each other, vying for power. Some surrendered, others fled, and many were executed by their own officers. Earth's fleet, on the brink of destruction, suddenly found the Imperial forces breaking apart. Victory was theirs. Months later, the war was over. The once mighty galactic empire had crumbled into chaos. Entire worlds declared independence, vowing never to bow to tyranny again. And at the center of it all, humanity stood victorious. No longer the hunted, no longer the underdogs, but the liberators of the galaxy. Admiral Connors stood on the bridge of the Titan, watching the stars. The war was over, but the future was just beginning. Humanity had not just survived. They had won. The war was over, but the scars it left behind would take centuries to heal. The once mighty galactic empire was gone, its fleets shattered, its ruling elite dead or in hiding. What remained were fractured worlds, struggling to define their future. And at the heart of it all stood humanity. For the first time in history, Earth was not just another world in the galaxy. It was the center of it. In the aftermath of the war, former imperial territories fell into chaos. Without the Emperor's rule, warlords rose to power, each trying to carve out their own dominion. Some sought to restore the old ways, but others saw an opportunity for freedom. Humanity had a choice. Would they conquer, or would they rebuild? The war had cost them billions of lives. The temptation to exact revenge on the former imperial worlds was strong. Many voices in Earth's new government argued that humanity should take the throne for itself, ruling over the galaxy as the Empire once did. But Admiral Connors, now the most respected leader in human history, had only one answer. We did not fight for conquest. We fought to end tyranny. And so, humanity took a different path. Instead of ruling through fear, Earth helped the fractured worlds form a new alliance, one built on mutual defense, trade, and cooperation. It was not an empire. It was a republic. The United Systems Federation was born. A coalition of former imperial colonies, newly liberated worlds, and alien civilizations that had suffered under the Empire's rule. For the first time in galactic history, power was shared, not hoarded by a single species, and at its center was Earth, not as conquerors, but as the spark of a new age. Not everyone accepted the new order. Some imperial admirals refused to surrender, retreating into the shadows, gathering remnants of the fleet, and vowing vengeance. Among them was Grand Admiral Vortanus, once the Emperor's most trusted warlord, now the leader of a shattered remnant force. He had seen his god fall, but he refused to believe the war was over. "We will rise again," he promised his followers. "We will burn Earth to the ground." He fled beyond the known systems, disappearing into the dark regions of space. Rumors spread of secret imperial bases, hidden fleets waiting for the day they could strike back. And so the war did not truly end. It simply changed. The Silent Fleet, once humanity's shadow force during the war, was now repurposed for a new mission. Hunt the last remnants of the Empire. Find them. Eliminate them. The war may have been won, but humanity would never let another empire rise again. With peace beginning to take hold, humanity finally turned its eyes beyond war. For centuries, Earth had been on the defensive, always fighting, always struggling to survive. But now, for the first time, they could look to the stars with hope. The first human-led expedition beyond the former imperial borders set course for a distant, uncharted world, a world untouched by war, a world where humanity could build something new. As the colony ships left Earth's orbit, carrying thousands of pioneers toward a new beginning, a message was broadcast across the galaxy. We are not conquerors, we are explorers, we are builders, and no empire, no tyrant will ever silence us again. Humanity had started this war as the underdogs. Now, they were the future. Despite the hope, despite the victories, one thing remained certain. The galaxy was still a dangerous place. There would always be those who sought power through fear, those who believed they could crush the weak. But now, there was a name that struck fear into the hearts of tyrants, a name that had brought the greatest empire in history to its knees: humanity. And to any future empire that dared to rise, humanity's fleet would always be waiting.